Man, today we got serial killers that never existed. All right, serial killer that never existed. All right, bro. Make sure you like, subscribe. You know what I'm saying? Follow me on Twitch. I do be on Twitch, TikTok. All that shit will be in the description, man. Let's get into it.
The Phantom of Heilbronn. On April 25, 2007, a 25-year-old German police officer named Michelle was on patrol with a 22-year-old named Martin in Heilbronn, Germany. The day had been pretty uneventful, so with nothing else going on, the two decided to post up in the corner of a nearby park's parking lot. What neither of them knew, however, was that they had just become targets, because just minutes later, an armed individual approached their car from the back and opened fire, shooting both officers in the head. A taxi driver eventually noticed the aftermath of this crime and reported it to the authorities almost immediately. Surprisingly, when first responders arrived, they found both officers lying outside the car. Later investigation revealed that their service weapons and handcuffs were missing, suggesting the assailant must have stolen them from the car, which would also explain why the two were outside. Miraculously, despite being shot in the head, Officer Martin managed to survive the encounter after numerous surgeries and being in a coma for 4 weeks. Unfortunately, the incident resulted in total amnesia regarding the attack, leaving the investigators with no direct leads to follow. But just as they were about to lose hope, investigators discovered a DNA sample from the perpetrator on the patrol car's dashboard. However, what should have been the key to solving the case led to a massive rabbit hole instead. One that linked this tragic incident to dozens of crimes dating back more than a decade. You see, while analyzing this DNA sample, the forensics team discovered that it matched perfectly with samples collected from various prior crimes. The first of which happened all the way back in May of 1993, when a 62-year-old woman was strangled to death with a steel wire in her home in Germany. The second crime linked to the same perpetrator happened in March of 2001, when a 61-year-old met his end in a similar manner also in Germany. Apart from their age, another similarity between the two cases was that large sums of money were missing from both homes. Then, in October of the same year, a child accidentally stepped on a syringe used in combination with drugs while playing in a park. The DNA sample from this syringe also matched the two deadly incidents from earlier. And with further analysis of this sample, the investigators were able to build a rudimentary profile of the perpetrator, according to which the criminal was an Eastern European woman who robbed the elderly to fuel her addiction. This connection became more concrete as investigators analyzed samples from hundreds of other unsolved crimes since 2001 and found matches from over 20 burglaries and thefts of cars and motorbikes. Some of these crimes even extended beyond Germany, like when a group of Vietnamese precious gemstone traders were attacked by a gang of robbers in France in 2004, as well as a burglary at an optometrist store in Upper Austria in March 2007. However, what made all of these cases strange was that, aside from the DNA sample, the perpetrator left no clues at the scene. She wasn't caught on any CCTV cameras, and there weren't any witnesses either, earning her the nickname of the Woman Without a Face. 4 men were even arrested for the robbery in France, but none of them gave any description of this woman either. So, despite linking all these incidents, the investigators were no closer to solving the case of Officer Michelle. Unfortunately, the attack on Officers Michelle and Martin was only the prelude to even worse crimes. Something that became apparent in January 2008 when police discovered the remains of 3 men floating in a local body of water. 2 of the men had gunshot wounds to the head, and the third had been strangled, which were the 2 methods used by the mysterious woman in previous incidents. These men had come to Germany to buy a used car, and they were likely attacked and robbed after making the purchase. By this point, it was clear. The police in Germany, France, and Austria were dealing with an elusive serial killer and robber who is now being called the Phantom of Heilbronn. Investigators in the 3 countries were working day and night to uncover her identity. Shockingly, even with the ongoing search, the Phantom stayed active. Her DNA was found at 7 different robbery locations over the next 3 months, as well as in the car of a 45-year-old named Diana after a mysterious death in a pool. In total, the Phantom's DNA linked her to over 40 robberies and thefts and 6 confirmed murders across 3 countries. How could someone be in so many different, completely unrelated places, commit so many crimes, and leave behind no evidence besides her DNA? Something was not adding up. Fortunately, all of these questions were finally answered in March 2009 when a man was arrested on a charge completely unrelated to any of the Phantom's cases. But when he was given a DNA test, it came back as a perfect match for the Phantom's DNA, who was supposed to be a woman. This breakthrough allowed investigators to uncover the only logical reason why the Phantom's DNA was found on so many different crime scenes: contamination. Sure enough, when they ran DNA tests on some of the unused cotton swabs investigators used to gather samples, they had traces of her DNA as well. Following this lead, investigators were able to track down the source, a female worker at the factory where these swabs were packaged, who, after some digging, was cleared of all the crimes linked to her DNA. As it turned out, investigators had been using cotton swabs that were never meant to be used for forensic analysis in the first place. And while this embarrassing revelation was somewhat amusing, it didn't change the fact that dozens of victims were denied justice while the police chased a phantom killer who never existed.
Yeah. Damn.
This is an 11-page report with a staggering amount of information that data brokers can collect about you and sell for a profit.
Hey, nigga,
I
Ed!
truly think if you
Get that nigga out of here. I thought that shit was a part of the video. I was about to say, my nigga, what? What the?
12 to pursue an art degree at Manchester Metropolitan University, and it didn't take long for him to build a close circle of friends. He was with these friends when he visited the Warehouse Project nightclub on New Year's Eve of the same year. Unfortunately, the group got separated at around 11
Damn,
p.m.
that
when
nigga
one of
all
the
up on the
friends received a
curb. Y'all
text
see
from
that?
Sovik stating that he had been kicked out of the club.
Oh,
But
what
when
the?
his friend tried to contact
Hey.
him back a few minutes later, Sovik did not respond. He also didn't return home that night, prompting his flatmate to file a missing person report around 5:30 a.m. Sovik was last seen standing outside the club for only a minute before walking away. But despite this CCTV footage giving a clue about the direction he went, Sovik was unfortunately nowhere to be found. The breakthrough in his search came on January 22nd when a team of divers discovered his body in the Bridgewater Canal near Old Trafford Stadium. After some more investigation, Sovik's death was ruled an accident. Put simply, he fell into the canal, was immobilized by the freezing water, and drowned before anyone could notice and help. However, while the official investigation didn't find any injuries or signs of foul play, for many, Sovik's death wasn't an accident at all. To them, he was the latest victim of the Manchester Pusher, a mysterious serial killer who targeted young men around the Manchester area and ended their lives by pushing them into the many bodies of water scattered throughout the city. The idea of this serial killer was first popularized by a 2015 article written by psychology professor Craig Jackson after he noticed that over 85 mysterious drowning deaths had occurred in Manchester since 2008. This was far higher than the national average, and what made this even more alarming was that in over a third of these cases, investigators couldn't determine the circumstances leading up to the drowning at all. However, the most concrete evidence of the pusher's existence comes from an incident that happened on April 10, 2018. On that night, at around 10 p.m., a 34-year-old man was cycling home from work alongside the Bridgewater Canal. This was a part of his daily routine, and he had traveled this exact route countless times before, so he wasn't paying much attention to his surroundings, a mistake that nearly cost him his life. A man suddenly emerged from the shadows and swung his arm at the cyclist, striking his neck and causing him to fall into the canal.
Ooh.
Fortunately, the water wasn't cold enough to immediately incapacitate the cyclist, so he quickly swam back to the canal's edge. But the man who pushed him in was still there, and as soon as the cyclist tried to get out, the man kicked his hand, sending him back into the water. Luckily, an unrelated ambulance happened to drive by the canal at that time, frightening the man and causing him to flee the scene. After minutes of struggling, the cyclist eventually managed to get himself out of the canal and back to safety. He later shared his story on Facebook, further fueling the pusher narrative. The Manchester police, however, have dismissed this theory at every turn, insisting that the mysterious serial killer is nothing more than a myth or urban legend. David Wilson, an official from the Manchester Water Safety Partnership, has even gone as far as to claim that a significant number of these deaths were likely alcohol-related, where intoxicated men accidentally fall into the river and couldn't save themselves before tragically losing their lives, which, given the circumstances, makes the most sense. Especially since the canal is surrounded by numerous bars and nightclubs. And also because, despite the countless CCTV cameras in that area, none have ever captured someone following or attacking one of the drowning victims. Many believe that the story of the cyclist seeing and surviving the Manchester Pusher, which is the only account of someone actually seeing him, was either way over-dramatized or made up completely to fuel conspiracy theories. So, unless some groundbreaking evidence comes forward, the Manchester Pusher will go down as a serial killer who never existed. Salish Sea Killer. On the 20th of August 2007, a 12-year-old girl was walking alongside the coastline of Jedediah Island, located in the middle of the Salish Sea in British Columbia, Canada. when something unusual washed up on the shore, catching her attention. A closer look revealed that it was a size 12 running shoe that looked almost new. Curious, she picked it up to examine it further, but it felt unusually heavy. The reason for which became clear as soon as she looked inside. There was a nearly intact, severed human foot still in it. Now, a discovery like this was unsettling enough on its own. What made it far more disturbing, however, was that it wouldn't be the last. Just 6 days later, a couple was out hiking on the coast of Gabriola Island, 31 miles or 50 kilometers south of Jedediah Island, when they discovered another running shoe with a foot inside. An important thing to note here is that the two shoes were completely different in size, brand, and model. They were also both for the right foot. In other words, they belonged to two different people. From there, discoveries of shoes with feet still inside them became a hauntingly regular occurrence in the areas surrounding the Salish Sea, with 1 or 2 shoes being discovered almost every year. In total, 21 different shoes were discovered up to 2019, giving rise to many theories trying to explain the strange phenomenon. These included everything from the shoes belonging to the victims of the 2004 tsunami in the Indian Ocean to people kidnapped and tortured by gangsters. That said, the theory that gained the most attention online linked these discoveries to the so-called Salish Sea Killer, someone who cut off their victims' feet before dumping them into the Salish Sea, allowing the currents to scatter them across the region. But as morbidly intriguing as this theory was, it couldn't have been further from the truth. The only evidence backing the serial killer premise was the shoe discovered in December 2011 in Seattle. This one was wrapped in a plastic bag and had the lower leg still attached to it. However, given the bag and the attached leg, it was likely an attempt to hide the evidence of an unrelated murder and had nothing to do with the other shoes discovered around the Salish Sea. More importantly, DNA testing on the discovered feet allowed investigators to uncover the true origins of the mysterious shoes. And what they found was a lot more mundane, yet equally tragic. Put simply, the vast majority of the discovered feet belonged to people who fell into the Salish Sea and drowned, whether by accident or on purpose. One of the discovered remains even belonged to a fisherman who went missing all the way back in 1987. As for why the feet were severed from the rest of the body, the explanation is actually quite straightforward. Marine animals likely ate the remains of the deceased, while the shoes kept the feet specifically protected. Once they were detached from the rest of the body, the buoyancy of the running shoes made it easier for the currents to carry them to the shore. And while these discoveries spiked between 2007 and 2019, there are still some being found to this day, with the most recent case emerging in July of 2023, further weakening the serial killer theory. The Chicago Strangler. In June 1999, 32-year-old Angela Ford left her home in Chicago to pick up her children's report cards from their school. Before leaving, she reassured her children that it was a short trip and that she'd be back in less than 30 minutes. But she never returned. Her husband filed a missing person report that same evening. Unfortunately, Angela wouldn't be found for another week until June 14th. Investigators found her barely alive in an abandoned building just 2 miles from her home. She had been strangled and suffered multiple other injuries. Sadly, while she was still breathing, she had fallen into a deep coma. And after remaining in that state for over a year and a half, Angela passed away on January 4th, 2001. Worst of all, the person who did this to her was never identified. Though, over time, Angela would be recognized as the first victim of a supposed serial killer known as the Chicago Strangler. The existence of this alleged serial killer was first brought to light by investigative journalist Thomas Hargrove in 2018. Thomas is the founder of a nonprofit called Murder Accountability Project. This organization gathers crime data from around the US and then uses a custom algorithm to find links and connections between these crimes based on factors like location, method, victim's profile, and much more. In 2014, Thomas's algorithm even helped the police tie several horrific crimes to a single suspect, eventually resulting in the arrest of Darren Dion Van, a serial killer who later confessed to ending the lives of 7 different women, though the actual number could be as high as 18. Put simply, Thomas's organization and algorithm are proven to be effective at solving real cases, which is why it drew a lot of attention in 2018 when he proposed the existence of the Chicago Strangler. According to Thomas's report, the Chicago Strangler is believed to have claimed the lives of as many as 51 women, beginning with Angela Ford in 2001. And at first glance, the similarities between these dozens of incidents are striking to say the least. All of these victims are women, mostly African American descent. Many of them also came from the city's poorer neighborhoods. Most importantly, the methods used in some of these cases were eerily consistent. Like 21-year-old Teresa Bunn, whose remains were discovered in a flaming dumpster in November 2007. And according to a later autopsy report, she was more than likely strangled before the perpetrator discarded her in the dumpster and set it ablaze. Then, just a few days later, the Chicago Fire Department also discovered the remains of 52-year-old Hazel Lewis, who tragically suffered the same fate as Teresa. Those are just two of multiple examples where the victims took their last breaths under similar circumstances. Thus, the conclusion that they were all committed by the same person or group, the Chicago Strangler.
It had to be, though.
However,
It had to
not
be.
everyone agrees with this assessment. Critics of the serial killer theory argue that while the number of victims at 51 seems absurdly high at first, it averages out to about 3 per year, which, given Chicago's population of over 2.6 million, is sadly not out of the ordinary. However, the strongest opposition to the idea of the Chicago Strangler comes from Chicago's own police department, with a spokesperson stating, "There is absolutely no information to suggest that this is the work of a serial killer." The city's chief of detectives, Melissa Staples, also mentioned that they've taken DNA samples from many of the incidents attributed to the Chicago Strangler. But even after thorough testing, they did not find any correlation between the samples, suggesting each crime was committed by a different person. Whether or not the Chicago Strangler is a real person is still debated to this day. But given all the evidence, the most likely
That nigga is a
explanation
real.
is
That's
they
a
never
real
existed,
nigga, bro.
And all the murders committed were isolated and unrelated tragedies.
That was a real nigga, bro. I ain't gonna lie, bro. That last nigga, that was a real nigga, bro. I ain't gonna lie, bro. Too much shit was adding up, bro. Too much shit was adding up, bro.